The moment my mom lifted her wine glass to toast my younger brother's brand new Lexus, something inside me quietly snapped, like the sound of a hairline fracture splitting wider, though nobody heard it except me. It was a Friday night, one of those forced family dinners at that overpriced Italian place downtown. White tablecloths, fake candles, waiters who say, "Excellent choice, no matter what you order." The type of place that makes regular people pretend to be richer than they are. I sat at the edge of the table, furthest from Mom, closest to the exit, like always, just quietly waiting for it all to be over. I had barely touched my lasagna. I never liked ricotta, but Mom insisted it was the house specialty, and God forbid anyone challenge her restaurant pick. The conversation all night was about Chad. How he finally got promoted. How his new place has a view of the water. How he negotiated the car dealership down $5,000. You'd think the guy cured cancer the way they gushed about him. I just kept nodding, swirling ice in my glass, giving polite half smiles, like a damn hotel concierge. Then came the toast. That damn toast. Mom stood up. She actually stood up in the middle of the restaurant, lifted her glass, and said, "To Chad. For working so hard. For never settling. For always aiming higher." Everyone clinked glasses, smiling like we were in a commercial for American exceptionalism. I didn't lift mine. I couldn't. Something lodged itself in my throat and burned. She never gave me a toast. Not when I bought my first house at 28. Not when I graduated trade school. Not when I stayed up for 3 nights straight building her a deck in her backyard that she now tells her neighbors was a contractor job. Not when I got married. Not even when I got divorced and needed someone to look me in the eye and just say, "You'll get through this." I didn't say a word. I just stood up, quietly, slowly, like my joints were filled with cement, and walked out the side door before dessert even made it to the table. No one noticed. Not right away. The air outside was cold and dry, one of those crisp autumn nights where even the asphalt feels brittle. I sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel, not turning the key, just breathing, just staring straight ahead, thinking, I'm 47 and I still feel like I'm 12 at that damn kitchen table, invisible between my brother's trophies and Mom's praise. You know what's funny? I didn't even like that car Chad bought. A Lexus. Flashy as hell. Looked like something a dentist buys when he's cheating on his wife. But the way Mom talked about it, you'd think it was a damn spaceship. "He deserves it," she said. That line. I heard it twice at dinner. He works so hard, he deserves it. I wanted to ask her, what did I deserve? Working 16-hour shifts fixing busted HVACs in crawl spaces with mold thicker than bread dough? Coming home to an empty apartment because my wife got tired of being married to someone who was always tired? I guess I just didn't have the kind of struggle worth toasting. I sat in the car for 20, maybe 30 minutes. My phone didn't ring. No text from Mom. Not even a "where'd you go" from Chad. The waitress finally called, said they were closing the tab and couldn't find me. I told her to split it down the middle. She paused, asked if I was sure, said my side didn't even include dessert. I told her I was sure. It wasn't about the damn cannoli. It was about the principle. I paid for half a dinner I was emotionally starved through, and that felt fitting. A metaphor and a receipt. You ever get that feeling like you're watching your own life from outside your body? Like you're standing just behind yourself, watching you sit at a table with people who share your blood but wouldn't recognize your soul in a lineup? That was me all night. Watching Eli the son, Eli the brother, Eli the afterthought. A cardboard cutout with a napkin on its lap. The worst part? I wasn't even angry. Not then. I didn't rage or scream or throw a drink. I just felt empty. Hollowed out, like someone scooped me clean with a melon baller years ago, and I'd only just now realized it. I felt like a background character in a movie about my brother's success. The kind who doesn't get lines, just nods and reacts while the star shines. I drove around for hours that night. Didn't go home. Didn't call anyone. Just took turns without thinking, like maybe I could find a road that led back to when things started to go wrong. Spoiler alert, I didn't. But I did end up at that gas station on 5th and Elmore, the one Dad used to take me to when I was a kid for those greasy hot dogs we weren't supposed to tell Mom about. I sat there, engine off, chewing on stale memories and wondering how the hell my life got so quiet. That was the night I decided I was done pretending. Done playing the good son. The responsible one. The one who smiles while slowly disappearing. That dinner didn't break me, it just revealed the cracks that were always there, running deep beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to split wide open. And when they finally noticed I was gone, when the check came and I wasn't there to nod and pull out my wallet, I wonder if they paused. I wonder if they looked around and asked, "Where's Eli?" Or maybe, just maybe, they finished dessert and never looked up. I don't remember the first time I realized I was invisible, but I do remember the first time it hurt. I must have been around 8, maybe 9, sitting at the long kitchen table with a birthday cake in front of me, chocolate with blue icing, the kind I used to pretend I liked so I wouldn't seem ungrateful. There were no candles, no singing, no clapping. Just me, a knife, and a half-hearted happy birthday, Eli, scribbled crookedly in frosting, like someone forgot, and tried to fix it last minute. Mom was on the phone, pacing near the sink, talking to one of her sisters about Chad's school project, something with papier-mâché and a volcano that didn't even work right. Dad was still at work. Chad was upstairs playing video games, the ones I wasn't allowed to touch because I didn't respect the rules. I cut my own slice, sat alone, and told myself this was fine. It's just a cake, right? That same year, I got second place in the school spelling bee. Second place out of 90 kids. I came home holding the certificate like it was a key to their attention, thinking maybe this time they'd look up from whatever was more important. Chad had gotten detention that day for throwing an eraser at a substitute teacher. Guess which story got told at dinner? Guess which story got laughter, and who got a nod and a distracted good job without even eye contact? You start to learn, after a while, that love in some families isn't about fairness or balance, it's about gravity. Whoever pulls harder, louder, flashier, gets more. And Chad was always loud. Even when he failed, he did it with flair. When he quit soccer, it was because the coach didn't see his potential. When he got a C- in algebra, it was the teacher's fault for not keeping the class engaged. I never failed. I never made excuses. I just did the work, came home, kept quiet, waited for someone to notice the difference. No one ever did. By the time I was 13, I'd taught myself not to expect much. I stopped inviting them to things. The piano recital when I played Claire de Lune perfectly after weeks of practice? No one came. The seat in the third row, marked reserved for parents, stayed empty. I played anyway. Got a polite clap from strangers. Came home to a cold dinner and a question about why I didn't take out the trash before leaving. That was the night I stopped playing piano for anyone but myself. Music wasn't a bridge anymore. It was insulation. Have you ever felt like you were invisible in your own family? Like no matter what you did, it just wasn't loud enough to be heard? Let me know if this hits close to home. Maybe you were the one who always held the camera but never got in the picture. Maybe you were the first to arrive, the last to be thanked, the one who remembered birthdays but never got a call on yours. If that's you, I see you. I've lived in that quiet for so long, I started to mistake it for peace. Even holidays, which are supposed to feel like unity, just made the space between us more obvious. Christmas morning, I'd wake up early, shovel the driveway, clean the steps, set the coffee machine before anyone got up. Chad would stroll in at 11, bedhead in boxers, and still get all the attention. Look who finally decided to grace us with his presence. Mom would laugh, like he was a movie star just off a private jet. I got him gifts I saved up for 1 year, a custom-stitched football jersey with his college number. He gave me a Starbucks gift card, still in the envelope. But it wasn't just about presents or parties. It was about being seen. Acknowledged. Like your place at the table wasn't a courtesy, but a given. Like you weren't the other one, the reliable one, the background character in a family sitcom where the laugh track never played for your lines. I didn't want applause. I just wanted awareness. I wanted them to remember something about me that wasn't a chore, a mistake, or a side note in Chad's biography. There was one time, just once, when I thought maybe that would change. Senior year of high school, I got accepted into a trade apprenticeship program ahead of schedule. It meant good money, stable work, a real future. I brought the letter home, handed it to Mom with a smile so wide it felt unnatural on my face. She looked at it, nodded, and said, "That's good, honey. Can you pick Chad up from practice at 6?" That letter ended up in a drawer. I never brought home another. And still, I kept showing up. Family birthdays, Sunday dinners, house projects, God, I built them a patio one summer, poured every bag of concrete myself, because we don't need to hire someone, Eli knows how. I was their backup plan. Their convenience. But never their pride. Never the one they toasted. When Chad turned 16, he got a used Honda Civic. Nothing flashy, but reliable. I still remember the bow on the hood. Bright red, ridiculous, like something from a car commercial. Mom cried when he opened the garage and saw it. Dad took pictures like it was a wedding. They called it a reward for all your hard work. I stood there holding the camera, snapping pictures, not realizing until later that I wasn't in a single one of them. That was the moment, I think, when I started carrying something heavier than disappointment. Not hate. Not even jealousy. Just a quiet certainty that I would always be the one left out of the frame. The one holding the camera. The one driving himself to school while everyone else got applause for just showing up. And all these years later, sitting in that restaurant, watching Mom toast Chad's new Lexus with the same wide-eyed pride she had when he got that Civic, I realized that some things never change. Some roles are cast early, and you either accept the script or you walk off stage. That night, I walked off stage. No applause. No curtain call. Just me, my car, and the kind of silence that doesn't end when you close the door. I used to believe that if you were good, just good in the quiet, dependable, show up every damn day sense, life would eventually notice you, like some kind of cosmic payroll department finally cutting your check after years of unpaid overtime. I carried that belief like a second spine through my 20s and 30s, thinking that if I did everything right, kept my head down, paid my bills, loved one woman honestly, took care of people who didn't ask to be taken care of, I'd be seen. I'd be chosen. I'd be enough. But life doesn't work like that. And neither do families. Chad has always had what I call a high-gloss life. The kind that photographs well. Social media filters weren't made for guys like me. They were made for guys like him. White teeth, tailored shirts, office with a view, always surrounded by people who clap when he walks into a room. He's a regional VP now for some marketing firm that sells illusions to companies that sell more illusions. His Instagram is a highlight reel of rooftop drinks, leadership seminars, and overpriced brunches with captions like "Grind never stops." Meanwhile, I was working 12-hour days fixing furnaces in houses that smelled like old carpet and boiled cabbage, trying to make ends meet in a town that never gave a damn if I sank or swam. It's not that I'm jealous. At least, I don't think I am. It's more like exhausted. Exhausted by the constant comparison, the unspoken contest where I never agreed to compete but still lost anyway. I had a marriage once, quiet, not perfect, but stable. Her name was Tara. We met when I came to fix her mom's busted AC unit in the middle of July. She liked that I listened more than I talked, that I showed up when I said I would, that I didn't play games. For a while, it felt like I'd finally been picked for something. Not because I was flashy, but because I was solid. We were married for 6 years. No kids. Not by choice, but by bad timing and worse biology. It started fading in year 5, right around the time I started staying late at jobs just to avoid the silence at home. She said she loved me but couldn't feel me anymore, like living with a ghost who folded the laundry. The day she left, she packed so quietly I didn't even realize she was done until the apartment echoed. I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I just watched her go, wondering when I'd become someone who was easy to walk away from. I didn't tell my family about the divorce for 3 months. When I finally did, Mom looked up from her phone, blinked, and said, "Well, you never really seemed like you were happy anyway." As if that was an excuse to not have asked, not have checked in, not have even noticed that my wedding ring was gone. Then she asked if I could help Chad move into his new condo the next weekend. I said yes. Of course I said yes. It's always been like that. Me needing something is met with silence. Chad needing something is met with open doors, wallets, and excuses. I remember the time I cracked a molar, one of those deep, body-shaking cracks that makes it hard to think straight. I didn't have dental insurance at the time, had just switched jobs, and the emergency surgery was going to run over $2,000. I asked Mom, reluctantly, shame dragging behind every word, if she could loan me the money. I promised to pay it back in installments. She said she just couldn't right now. Things were tight, she said. She had her own bills. Fair enough. I swallowed ibuprofen like candy for 2 weeks and ended up on antibiotics from a walk-in clinic that smelled like despair and pine sol. 2 months later, Chad posted a picture of himself next to a brand new SUV. Lexus again. This time in black. Leather interior. When I asked about it at dinner, offhandedly, just to make conversation, he said Mom co-signed the loan to help him get better financing. Said it like it was nothing. Like it was a given. I laughed, one of those dry, breathless laughs that makes people uncomfortable, and said nothing more for the rest of the night. Being good was supposed to count for something. Doing the right thing. Holding your tongue. Showing up. I thought maybe it added up in the long run, like emotional savings that would pay off in quiet security. But all it's ever gotten me is a front row seat to other people's celebrations. I've held the ladder while others climbed, watched the balloons float up without my name on a single one, and told myself that being the support beam meant I was part of the structure. But support beams don't get thanked. They don't get remembered. They just get leaned on. And it's not like I've been perfect. God knows I've had my share of bad days, cold silences, and resentful mutterings. But I never asked for much, just to be seen. Just once to hear Mom say, "I'm proud of you, Eli." Not in a backhanded way, not followed by a comparison or a dig, but clean and honest. Like maybe my life, plain and unglamorous as it is, mattered to someone. The last time I visited her house, the garage door was open and Chad's new car sat there shining like a trophy. She asked me if I thought the trim around the windows looked okay. I told her I thought it looked fine. Then I walked into the guest room, the one I helped paint 3 years ago, and saw a framed photo on the nightstand. Mom, Dad, and Chad at his company's award banquet. No room for anyone else in the frame. When I left that day, I found myself thinking about Dad again. Not the memory of him, he's been gone a long while now, but the box I kept from his things. The one marked tax docs that I've never opened, even though I know it's not just tax stuff. There's something in there. Something that's been waiting to be read. Something that maybe, just maybe, will tell me whether all these years of silence meant something, or were just that. Silence. I pulled it out of the closet last night, dust still on the lid, sat it on the table, and stared at it for an hour without opening it. I think I'm finally ready to see what he had to say. I just hope it doesn't make me feel more invisible than I already do. I didn't open the box the first night I took it out of the closet. I just sat across from it, elbows on the kitchen table, staring at the word tax written in my father's neat, all caps handwriting, as if that label was enough to keep anyone from ever wanting to see what was inside. The cardboard had yellowed slightly at the corners, the kind of color that speaks of years untouched, like time itself had formed a protective crust around it. I ran my fingers along the edge of the lid more times than I can count, each time telling myself it was no big deal, just old forms, receipts, maybe a birth certificate or two that didn't matter anymore. But something had been pulling at me ever since Chad got that toast, and I slipped away, some voice in the back of my mind whispering that I didn't walk away from dinner just because of a car. I walked away because I had reached the end of pretending that silence didn't wound. So the next night, I opened the box. At first, it was exactly what it claimed to be: W-2s from the 90s, manila folders with itemized deductions, some old warranties for appliances we didn't even own anymore. But buried under it all, tucked inside a blue folder labeled simply Notes, was something else entirely. 2 envelopes, both addressed in that same slanted, deliberate handwriting I hadn't seen in over a decade. One said, "To Chad." The other said, "To Eli." Both sealed, both unopened. My hands started shaking the moment I picked them up, and I didn't even realize I was crying until I saw the water spots blooming on the paper. I stared at my name on that envelope for what felt like hours. I don't know what I expected, honestly. Maybe nothing. Maybe a page of hollow fatherly wisdom that would feel like it came too late to matter. Maybe just a sentence or two meant to check a box of decency. What I didn't expect, what I wasn't prepared for, was the truth. And not the polished kind people say at funerals, but the unfiltered kind that strips away what you thought you knew and leaves you gasping at the bones of it. "Eli," it began, "I know you won't read this until I'm long gone. I didn't say what I needed to say while I was alive, because I never knew how. But I owe you the truth." I had to stop after that first paragraph, just to breathe. I stood up, walked around the apartment twice, turned on the faucet for no reason other than to hear something moving besides my heartbeat. Then I sat back down and kept reading because I knew deep in my gut that once I finished, something inside me would change forever. "You were always the one I could count on, and I know that sounds like a compliment, but it wasn't fair. I leaned on you too hard. Your mother leaned on you too hard. We let you carry the weight so that Chad could soar. And that was our mistake. We thought love meant letting the loudest one lead, when really it should have been about seeing the quiet ones more clearly." I read that line 5 times. Maybe more. I don't know. It was the first time in my life I'd ever heard acknowledgement that what I felt wasn't imagined. That I hadn't been crazy or bitter or overly sensitive. That I had been overlooked, not because I lacked value, but because I made it easy for everyone to forget I needed anything at all. He went on to explain things I hadn't known, and some I'd guessed, but never had confirmed. That when I asked Mom for that dental loan, she came to him, and he said no. Not because they couldn't afford it, but because, and I quote, "Eli will find a way." He admitted he was wrong. Said he thought he was pushing me to be stronger, but he was just pushing me away. And then he wrote something that hit harder than any memory I had of him standing silently at my high school graduation. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I hope someday you'll understand that my silence wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I didn't know how to speak your language." I think I blacked out for a second after that. That letter didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the years of feeling like I had to earn my own parents' attention with obedience and sacrifice. It didn't change the fact that Chad still got the spotlight, the support, the applause. But it cracked something open in me I didn't even know was still sealed shut. A part of me that had been waiting, begging, for just one adult in my childhood to say, "We failed you, and it wasn't your fault." I didn't open Chad's letter. I know people will judge me for that, maybe say it wasn't mine to keep closed. But here's the thing, there are truths I can't unlearn, and truths he might not be ready for. I didn't hide the envelope. I put it back in the box, right where I found it, so if Chad ever goes looking, he'll find it. But I'm not going to be the one to hand him the scalpel that slices open his version of the past. Let him find that on his own time. Later that night, I took my father's letter, folded it gently, and placed it inside my wallet. Not out of sentimentality, but because carrying it close felt like protection. Proof. A reminder that I hadn't imagined all those years of invisibility. That someone else had finally seen me, even if it was too late to say it out loud. The next morning, I got a call from Mom asking if I could help Chad assemble a new grill for his back patio. I told her I had plans. She didn't ask what they were. She just said, "Okay, maybe another time," and hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. But peace doesn't last long in families like mine. Because somehow, some damn way, Chad found out about the letter. And when he did, he didn't just get curious. He got angry. Angry in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids, and he broke my toy truck, then blamed me for leaving it out in the first place. Now the past isn't just rising, it's boiling. And I don't know what happens when the favorite son finally sees a crack in the mirror he's been polishing his whole life. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of gray, static-charged afternoon where the sky looks like it's holding its breath and everyone walks around pretending they don't feel the storm coming. Chad called me, first time in months, maybe longer, and his voice was tight, clipped, like he was trying to hold something back, but didn't have enough hands. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't even bother with small talk. Just said, I need to talk. In person. That was it. No context, no invitation. Just a demand dressed as a request. I told him to come by. Hung up before he could say anything else. I don't know why I agreed, but maybe some part of me had been waiting for this call since we were teenagers, when everything between us started looking like competition instead of kinship. He showed up 27 minutes later, because of course I watched the clock. Same SUV, same damn designer sunglasses, same look on his face like he owned the oxygen in the room, and was being generous just by breathing it near you. He didn't even knock, just walked in, like always. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the one I'd once bought secondhand and sanded down with my own hands, and he stood across from me like a lawyer approaching a hostile witness. His first words weren't hello. They were, why didn't you tell me about the letter? I didn't flinch. I didn't lie. I just looked up at him, calm as I could manage, and said, because it wasn't mine to share. His face twitched just a little, just enough for me to see the panic hiding under the surface. And then he exploded. Not physically, not in the way some men throw punches and knock chairs over, but in the way that polished men unravel when they realize the version of the past they've been spoon-fed is only half the meal. He accused me of hiding things, manipulating the narrative, playing victim. Said I was always acting like the wounded little soldier who didn't get a medal when the parade came through town. His words were sharp, fast, rehearsed like he'd been saving them for years, afraid that if he didn't say them now they'd rot inside him forever. But I didn't take the bait. Not right away. I let him pace. Let him spit his lines. Let him feel big, feel justified, feel in control. And then I asked the only question that mattered. Did you read yours? He stopped moving. Just like that. Like someone hit pause on his whole damn ego. He said no, said he couldn't. Said he took it out of the envelope and stared at it but couldn't bring himself to read a single line. And in that silence between his confession and my reply, I saw him for what he really was, not the golden boy, not the favorite, not the successful, shining image that our mother had polished until it blinded her, but a grown man terrified that the truth might shrink him. I told him mine didn't fix anything. That it didn't make me feel loved. That it didn't take back the years I spent wondering what I had done wrong to deserve being overlooked. But it did something. It made the silence real. Gave it a name. And that's something Chad had never been forced to do, name his silence, his doubts, his fear that maybe he was never loved for who he was, only for what he could perform. That's when it happened. He sat down. And that, in our family, is as close to surrender as anyone gets. He didn't look at me, just stared at the grain of the table and said, I told her not to do the toast. I thought I misheard him at first. Thought maybe he said he wanted her to do it. But no, he said it again, slower this time. I begged her not to make a big deal out of the car. Told her it was just a vehicle. Told her you'd be there, and she should keep it low-key. He looked like he was trying not to choke on something invisible. Said he knew how it would feel, knew it would blow up like it always did, her praising him in public like he was a war hero coming home from battle. Said he hated it, hated how she made him into something he never asked to be. Said, I didn't earn half the stuff they gave me. You did. You earned it by not asking. And that broke something in me I didn't know was still intact. Because hearing him say it, not in a fight, not in a snide dig, but like a confession, hit me harder than any of his screaming ever could. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was the first time I saw him bleed. I told him I didn't hate him. That I used to. That I envied the ease with which he moved through life, the way people leaned toward him instead of away. But I didn't anymore. Not really. Because I realized that being the golden boy wasn't freedom. It was a prison made of expectations, and he'd been trapped in it just as long as I'd been locked out of the house. And just like that, the conversation shifted. We weren't opponents anymore. We were survivors of the same wreckage, just stranded on different sides of the debris. Then the front door opened. We both turned our heads at the same time, and there she was, Mom, holding a grocery bag and her usual expression of impatient confusion. She looked at us sitting there and asked what was going on. Chad stood up too fast, like a teenager caught stealing from the liquor cabinet, and said, "Nothing, we were just talking." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. She looked at him, then me, and without even asking a follow-up, turned to him and said, "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Her voice softened. Her eyes searched his face like she expected him to have been wounded by something I did. Not once did she look at me like I might have been the one carrying a bruise. Not even a glance. And in that one moment, all the progress between us, me and Chad, teetered. I saw it in his eyes too. A flicker of shame, maybe regret, or just resignation that even when he tried to do the right thing, he would always be the center of her universe. And I would always be the moon, visible, but only in reflection. What do you do when the cycle doesn't break, even after the truth's been spoken? Maybe next time, I won't be the one who stays sitting at that table. Maybe next time, I'll be the one who finally stops showing up. Some memories don't fade, no matter how far you try to outrun them, no matter how many years you stack between then and now, like sandbags trying to hold back a flood. For me, that memory is Christmas Day, the year I turned 16, the exact age where you're old enough to understand the lies people tell themselves about family, but still young enough to hope they'll finally prove you wrong. That was the Christmas I realized I was alone, even in a room full of people with my last name. That was the day I decided I would never need them again, at least not in the way kids are supposed to need parents, the way we're wired to think love is something you can earn if you just behave, stay useful, stay out of the way. It had snowed heavy the night before, the kind of snow that silences the world, turns everything into a frozen cathedral where every sound is swallowed by the white. I woke up early, not because I was excited, but because I had to shovel the driveway before Dad got irritated. He'd mentioned it the night before, not even as a request, but a grunt in my direction. Get that driveway done in the morning. No please. No thank you. Just the kind of expectation that's passed down like a rusted tool nobody remembers buying. By the time I came back inside, my gloves were soaked through, fingers numb, cheeks raw from the wind. I could already hear laughter from the living room, Chad tearing open presents, Mom fussing over him like he was still 5 instead of the 11-year-old prince of the household. I dried off, walked in, and stood near the doorway, still holding the shovel. No one noticed. Not right away. I watched Chad open a new bike helmet, top of the line, bright red, with his name stitched across the back. Then a leather jacket, the kind I'd asked for 2 years in a row and was told we couldn't afford. I remember thinking maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they got 2. Maybe mine was coming. I waited. I finally cleared my throat, said something dumb like, "Merry Christmas," and Mom turned around with a smile, handed me a box the size of a toaster. I opened it slowly, half hoping for something personal, something that said, "We see you." It was a winter scarf. Generic. No tag. No card. Just navy blue and itchy as hell. She said, "I figured you could use a new one for work." I said thanks, sat down, and didn't open another gift because there weren't any more for me. That was it. After breakfast, they all bundled up to take Chad to the park to try his new rollerblades. I told them I wasn't feeling well, and no one pressed me. I stayed home and played the same CD on loop for 2 hours, staring out the window at the tracks I'd carved into the driveway snow, watching them slowly fill back in like I'd never been there. That was the first day I felt the walls go up inside me, slow, deliberate bricks built out of quiet, overlooked moments like that. Not tragic. Not explosive. Just 1,000 tiny cuts that taught me presence didn't mean being seen, and being useful didn't mean being loved. I stopped expecting them to notice when I did things right, and I made peace with the idea that my role in that house was more like furniture than family. Always there, always holding weight, never thanked, never missed. Years later, my ex-wife, Tara, said something to me during one of our last real arguments, before the silence took over our marriage completely. She said, "You never let anyone in because you already assume they won't stay." And she wasn't wrong. She saw right through me in that moment, cracked open something I'd been welding shut since I was a teenager. But what she didn't understand, what no one really does unless they've lived it, is that learning to not need people isn't something you're proud of. It's something you survive with. It's not armor. It's scar tissue. I used to think independence was noble. That not needing anyone made me strong. But that kind of strength is hollow. It doesn't hold warmth. It doesn't build anything. It just lets you endure longer while staying disconnected. And I carried that disconnection into every relationship I ever tried to build. I became the guy who never asked for help, who never complained, who was always fine, always handling it, always alone in a crowd of people who thought I was stable. I was the emotional lighthouse, always shining, never leaving the shore, built for other people to navigate by, not for anyone to actually live inside. But lately, especially since that dinner, since that damn toast and the letter from Dad, I've started to wonder if being present but unacknowledged was ever really worth it. What's the price of showing up your whole life if nobody ever turns to you and says, "I'm glad you're here"? What does it cost a person to be the one who always picks up the slack, fixes the leak, covers the shift, shows up at the funeral, helps move the furniture, remembers the birthdays, but never gets the toast, never gets the letter, never gets the eye contact? The truth is, I don't know if I even remember how to be vulnerable anymore. I don't know what it looks like to ask for something without bracing for disappointment. But something shifted when Chad sat across from me and told me he never wanted that toast. When he admitted he hated the pedestal just as much as I hated the basement. For the first time, I saw a crack in the foundation we were both raised on, and I don't know if I want to fix it or burn the whole house down. So here's what I decided. I'm not going back to their dinners. I'm not returning calls out of obligation. I'm not going to keep pretending that presence alone is enough when the room itself doesn't even make space for me. And maybe, just maybe, I'll finally learn how to live outside the role they cast me in. Because I'm tired of holding up walls that no one appreciates. I'm tired of being the one who stays just to prove something to people who never notice when I leave. Maybe it's time I stop measuring my worth by how many tasks I can complete before someone thanks Chad for breathing. The next move I make will be mine alone, and it's going to change everything. Maybe not for them, maybe not in a way that gets a toast, but for me. And for the first time in years, that might be enough. It was 2 days after the dinner when my phone rang middle of the afternoon, sun sliding past the blinds in those tired strips of light that make you feel like time itself has stalled. The number wasn't saved, but I recognized the area code right away. Something in my gut turned heavy before I even answered, like my body knew what was coming and didn't want to give it air. The voice on the other end was polite, overly so, in that customer service tone that pretends to be casual but is sharpened by the fact that they're calling about something awkward. It was the restaurant manager, the same place where I'd watched my mother toast my brother's shiny new car like he'd just returned from war instead of a luxury dealership. She said, "Hi, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we believe the bill from Friday night might not have been settled in full. We saw your name on the reservation and wanted to check." I stood in my kitchen, staring at the refrigerator door like it owed me an explanation, and said nothing for a few seconds too long. Then I cleared my throat and said I left early. I thought someone else would cover it. She paused, the kind of pause where you can feel the discomfort crackling through the line, and said, "Yes, we understand. It just wasn't clear. Thank you for confirming." I gave her a fake name and told her I'd check with the others. Then I hung up and didn't move for 10 minutes, because it wasn't the bill that mattered. It was the fact that for the first time in years, maybe decades, my absence had been noticed. Not emotionally, not in the way I'd always craved, but practically, financially, through the lens of obligation and inconvenience. They hadn't realized I was gone until it cost something. And that somehow was more honest than any toast could have ever been. I imagined the scene because I couldn't help myself, Mom reaching for her purse and realizing it wasn't enough, Chad looking around like someone forgot the script, the waitress hovering awkwardly, trying to be professional while the whole illusion of our perfect family dinner came apart at the seams. I imagined them whispering about me, maybe even getting annoyed, maybe saying something like, "Well, Eli was here, wasn't he? Where the hell did he go?" And maybe, just maybe, someone asked the one question that never used to come up: why would he leave? That night, Chad called me. I didn't answer. He didn't call again, but about an hour later a voicemail popped up. I stared at it for a while, that little red bubble like a dare. I didn't listen. Not then. I don't know why, but something in me wasn't ready. Not for whatever he wanted to say. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was him trying to explain the bill or brush it off or blame me or just say he understood now. But none of it mattered in that moment because I realized the voicemail wasn't for me, it was for him. For his guilt. His conscience. His need to close a loop I wasn't ready to close. I left the voicemail there, sitting like a weight on my phone screen, untouched but not deleted. It felt right to leave it hanging, like a thread that could unravel everything if I tugged too hard. The next day, I got a text from the same restaurant, this time confirming that the bill had been paid. Chad had called in and handled it. They were just following up to ensure guest satisfaction. I didn't reply. Didn't say thank you. Didn't ask why he did it. Because deep down, I knew the payment wasn't about money. It was about message. A way to say, I know you left, and I'm trying to clean it up. But some messes don't want to be cleaned. Some exits are meant to stain. I sat in my truck for a long time that evening, engine off, the cold creeping in through the seams of the doors, the silence louder than the radio ever could be. I pulled out the 2 letters, mine and Chad's. I hadn't touched his since I found it. I hadn't told him I still had it, though I suspect he knew. I thought about what would happen if I gave it to him. If I handed it over and watched him read it. If he cried. If he raged. If he said nothing at all. But more than that, I thought about Dad. About the fact that he wrote those letters knowing he wouldn't be there to explain them. Knowing we'd read them without the safety net of a conversation. It felt like he had lit a match and left it smoldering in a locked room, knowing we'd find it when the fire was already halfway through the walls. And maybe that was the point. I don't know if Chad and I will ever be brothers in the way people think siblings should be. Maybe too much time passed. Maybe too much got buried too deep. But in that strange way grief has of changing how you look at everything, I realized I didn't want to hold the weight anymore. Not just of the letter, but of the history, the expectation, the constant ache of waiting to be something different than I am. So I made a decision. I took both letters, wrapped them in a plain envelope, and put them on the passenger seat. Then I turned the key in the ignition, pulled out of my driveway, and started driving toward the cemetery. Toward the place where silence and truth and memory all live in the same ground. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do when I got there. Maybe I'd read Dad's letter again. Maybe I'd finally listened to Chad's voicemail. Maybe I'd burn both letters right there in front of the headstone and let the ashes blow away with whatever remained of the version of me that used to crave their approval. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going there for them. I was going there for me. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill just outside the edge of town, the kind of place that doesn't draw your attention until someone you knew ends up buried there, and, even then, you drive past it for years without stopping unless you have to. I hadn't been there in a long time, not since the funeral, not since the awkward gathering at the graveside where everyone cried just enough to be respectable but not enough to disturb the polished surface of their suits or mascara. I parked at the edge of the lot, cut the engine, and sat for a minute with both letters on my lap, fingers tapping against the steering wheel like maybe the rhythm would give me clarity. It didn't. The wind was sharp, not quite cold enough to hurt, but just bitter enough to make me wish I'd brought gloves. I walked slowly, boots crunching against the gravel and damp grass, past rows of names I didn't recognize, names that once belonged to people who mattered to someone, even if only briefly. I found his stone without much effort, tucked beneath a short, crooked tree whose leaves never really knew what season they were supposed to fall in. The headstone was plain, just his name, his dates, and a line that read "a man who worked with his hands," which felt both true and profoundly incomplete. I stood there for a while, saying nothing, because honestly, I didn't know what the hell I came to say. I'd imagined this moment 100 different ways, sometimes angry, sometimes grateful, sometimes overwhelmed with grief, but standing there in the silence, I just felt tired. Not physically, but bone deep, generationally tired. Like I was carrying a weight that wasn't entirely mine, but had been passed to me anyway, like a coat that didn't fit, but no one else would take. I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket and took out the 2 letters, his and mine. I read mine again, slower this time, letting each word settle like dust on the floor of a room that hadn't been swept in years. It still hurt. It still mattered. But it didn't own me anymore. I held Chad's letter for a minute, looked at the seal still unbroken, and thought about everything he might never read. Maybe one day he'll come out here too. Maybe he'll open it. Maybe he won't. Either way, it's not mine to carry anymore. I placed both letters on the headstone, weighed them down with a small rock from the base of the tree, and stepped back. I lit a cigarette I didn't really want, stale, bitter, the kind you only light for the symbolism of it, and raised it slightly, like a glass, like a toast no one asked for. To the ones who taught us everything, I said out loud, voice flat but steady, including what not to be. And there it was. That was the toast I needed. Not one made in a restaurant under soft lighting with wine glasses and fake laughter, but here, under a wide sky that didn't care about image or legacy or bullshit family roles. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there, letting the wind carry the smoke away, and felt something shift, not resolve, not closure exactly, but a kind of emptying that made room for something else. I thought about going back. Back to the house, back to the role, back to being the steady one who carries things and fixes things and waits for people to notice he's gone. I thought about answering Chad's voicemail, hearing whatever it was he needed to unload, maybe starting some version of reconciliation where we both pretend it can ever be clean. I thought about my mother, about her voice calling me sweetheart when she needed something and difficult when I dared to say no. I thought about it all, and then I got in the truck and didn't do any of it. The drive back from the cemetery was long and slow, not because of traffic, but because I kept taking the long way on purpose. Past the old high school, past the hardware store where I used to work weekends in college, past the gas station where Dad used to buy those hot dogs he pretended weren't a weekly ritual. I wasn't chasing nostalgia, I just needed to remind myself of the places I existed without anyone else defining what that meant. By the time I got home, the sun was dipping low behind the rooftops, casting that golden kind of light that makes even the ugliest buildings look like they belong in a movie. I sat in the driveway for a while, engine off, and watched the world keep turning without any regard for my personal revelations. That felt honest. That felt right. I haven't listened to Chad's voicemail. I probably won't. Not because I hate him. Not because I want to punish him. But because whatever he needs to say, he's going to have to learn to carry it himself. Just like I did. Just like we all eventually have to, once the applause stops and the spotlight swings to someone else. I didn't go inside right away. Just sat there, letting the stillness settle in. It wasn't peace. Not quite. But it was something close. Something enough. They'll tell the story their way. This is mine.